No, no, I wouldn't draw a straight line from strategic planning to committee change. That was more of a political discussion that had been happening at the county for the better part of 30 years. And they went from 30 county board of supervisors when I started down to 26, and today we're at 21. So I would say those things, I wouldn't make those two things congruent. And most of the other counties that we've talked to, they haven't done anything like that. So I would say that was more political and specific to Washington County's politics.
Would it be fair to say strategic planning, the primary focus of that is not to adjust the functions of the county board, i.e. committees and other issues, but to address budget?
It has almost, yeah, it has almost nothing to do with governance, the county number of supervisors, committee structure, board rules, relations between the executive and the legislative branch. Has almost nothing to do with that, and almost everything to do with what are your programs inside of the departments, and how do those programs relate to that vision, ultimately to that vision and mission that I talked about a minute ago. The governance model, the committee structure, the number of supervisors, whether you're administrator or executive, really doesn't make any difference. That's my opinion anyway. I think it could work no matter where you applied it.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Second question, sir. If you have a checks and balance between committees and legislative and the executive committee, which priority do you really want to follow? Do you follow the legislative group as what was passed and voted, or do you follow the executive and how they would like the priorities set?
The beauty of the strategic planning process and priority-based budgeting together is it will force the legislative and executive branch to come to a consensus on what that vision is, what the mission is, and then where the priorities of the organization lie. What I mean by that is it's going to force you to say, if it comes down to the final $100,000 and you've got to decide between whether it goes to program A or program B, how do we make that decision? And it's all theoretical as you're having these conversations. So once those priorities are established, it doesn't come down to a who's right and who's wrong. It comes down to, okay, we agreed that these were our priorities. Now, is this the appropriate interpretation? So you no longer, what has happened in Washington County, and I know a number of the other places that have utilized priority-based budgeting, even just here in Wisconsin, and it's international now, but what has happened is you stop talking about having these fights over territory, and you start having conversations over really material items. You're having public policy conversations instead of talking about who wins and who loses. I've seen it completely transform this organization, and not firsthand, but I've heard secondhand from the people who've implemented it in other places in Wisconsin and across the country. Completely transforms public policy conversations. I'll just give you just one, for instance. If you remember back to the time when Just Fix It was all that we talked about, road funding was a huge priority for everybody. When that time happened, instead of us talking about, where are we going to grab the money from, we were talking, the county board as a whole was talking about where on our priority list is we call it effective mobility and reliable infrastructure, but roads, where on our priority list is roads, and are there other areas that are a lesser priority that maybe aren't going to get an increase this year? Or if there's a position that opens up, are we going to not fill that position and move the money over towards roads? All of a sudden, the conversation changed completely from, taking from here to go to there to, well, we only have this many resources, so where do we put the money? It really turned it from fighting over. Washington County literally had a program when I first got here to save your paper clips in order to save money. We don't talk about such ridiculous things anymore. Now we talk about what are our highest priorities and how do we fund them?
Thank you. All right, Aaron. Aaron, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. So, to kind of piggyback on what Josh said, I think what PBB really does is helps take that strategic plan and prevent it from just sitting on a shelf. It really ties it in with what you're actually doing, ties it into your programs, and it tells you even the extent to which those programs, are fulfilling your priorities. So, just from a staff perspective, kind of the process was, first there is that strategic planning concept that you're establishing your priorities. In our case, it was essentially identifying 6 strategic results is what we called them, right? So for us, it was safe and secure community, economic growth and vitality, effective mobility and reliable infrastructure, access to basic physical, behavioral, and socioeconomic needs, and well-governed and administered county, right? So we've got 6. So those were the priorities that were identified as a result of that strategic planning exercise. It sort of condenses it down. Those terms that I used are just the broad terms. You actually go and you sort of define what it means to achieve those priorities as well. And so there's an exercise. It was a strategic planning exercise. Did we have the full county board was there?
Full county board.
And so again, you're identifying your priorities. Really where that connection happens is in the next steps, which are, you take literally everything you do and you identify that as a program, right? So you've got to pick a sweet spot of what actually is a program. But again, you take everything you do and you put it into a program. And then you literally take your costs, meaning your people costs and the rest of your operating costs, and you allocate them to those programs. So you know what it is you do, you know how much it costs, and then you literally take those programs, that list of programs, and you score them against your priorities, right? So that's that connection. Now you're taking all of your programs, and it starts with the department. They score their own programs, but really for us, the value was after that. We had peer review committees where we're scoring all of our programs as a committee. That committee was comprised of both staff and the county board members themselves, and that's where we actually had some consistency across that scoring. You score those programs against all of your priorities. There's a couple other criteria that you score them against, mandates being one, demand for those programs being another, and you can weight those priorities based on, the way you want to. In our case, priorities were weighted heavier than mandates and things like that. But again, that weighting comes into play. And so at the end, you're left with a list of priorities and a list of programs and scores that correspond to how well they correspond to your priorities. And so, you don't necessarily rank one program against another right away. We sort of draw what we call quartile bounds. So we could speak in broad terms about programs rather than drawing a line and pitting one program against each other, because really, I think an important point in implementing this for us was that everything is a priority as a function of us doing it. It's just that some are greater priorities than others, right? And so that's, you know, that gave us all the data we needed to facilitate those discussions and to get the ball rolling on actionable planning and decision making. And you know, to Josh's point, that all, you know, happens, but really ultimately you're adopting a budget in the end. Mm-hmm. And so to have that data and that baseline for the policy making discussion, really it helps take all of the noise out and lets you focus on your priorities.
The other nice thing in that same vein of thought is what's happening is you, the elected officials, are setting the priorities. My encouragement to you would be that this is an elected official driven process, and you know there may be an opportunity to hear from staff, to hear from the community, but at the end of the day, you're the folks who are elected to make sure that county government is delivering the services it's designed to do. So what ends up happening is you as elected officials are setting that vision. You set which is, you know, where are you going? You set a mission, which is, you know, how do we do that? You have values which tell you, you know, what it is you do. And then from there you set priorities. And those priorities are all four of those steps come from you, the elected officials, as a group coming to consensus and saying, this is how things operate and where we're going in Winnebago County. That is what I mean when I say it's super powerful, because what Aaron was describing is take any program. Take a program from the sheriff's department. Chances it scores against every single priority. That one program, let's just say it's the DARE program, it will score against everyone that Aaron laid out: effective mobility, access to basic needs, safe and secure community. And it scores in everyone. It's just a cumulative effect of how does it score across all of the priorities. And some programs will score very high across everything, and some will score low. And that's how you get that quartile effect. And what's interesting is you'll find departments will attempt to manipulate those scores. That's what we saw. But more often than not, the formula is so complicated that it doesn't allow for game playing. It really forces each one of those programs to align with the priorities that you set and the vision that you created as a group. It's really a coalescing process, I think, that pulls elected officials together and then helps staff to follow everybody rowing in one direction. That's really the power of strategic planning and priority-based budgeting.
And one observation that was pretty cool that we made in the last few years is you're able to take, you know, you could picture, you know, all of the costs, your total expenditures, and putting them by quartile, right? And so we could literally from year to year watch our spending go from, you know, come out of the low quartiles and go into our higher priorities. And it was just fascinating to be able to track that throughout the years and watch, you know, that shift.
Yes, sir.
Question. This is a kind of a series of process questions. How often do you review the strategic plan? Biannually, annually, 5 years?
It's really up to the organization. We have reviewed our strategic plan once since it was adopted back in 2015. It was 2020 that we looked at it. I'll tell you, not much changed, but we did sit down as a group, and by the time we reviewed it, I was elected county executive. So we sat, myself with the whole county board, and staff sat to the side. And we just talked through what's working, what's not working, what should be modified, and very little changed. I know other organizations that have done it more frequently, especially when there's big turnover on the board. And some that once they've got it set, it just doesn't change at all, and they don't go back until something's broken. So I think it's really up to you. What we found is it's working and it's working well, and we did talk about it, but we haven't changed anything.
And you used a third-party facilitator to make this happen?
Yeah, we actually used a couple of different facilitators. In 2015, when we started for the first time, we engaged a company that's, their name now is ResourceX. They used to be called the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting. They've got an international reputation, both with the Government Finance Officers Association and the International City County Managers Association. Very, very highly reputable company. I would highly encourage you to use them, not just because they have that reputation, but because they've worked with so many different organizations, and everyone's just a little bit different, and because they have a system that it both on the internet and like a procedural system that you go through. We also worked with a separate organization to do our strategic planning process. They were actually, I think, out of Cincinnati, Ohio. In 2020, I used the local UW Extension community development agent to help facilitate our discussion. So I think the strategic planning process has to run adjacent. Typically, ResourceX will run you through their priority-based budgeting program first, and then they'll run the strategic planning process through a subcontractor second. My personal preference is to do it the opposite, and I've told them that many times. I think you need a vision, mission, and values before you try to set priorities, and that's my opinion. But they are two separate entities that help drive the whole organizational discussion.
And they have staff that they use to conduct the interviews with the various people to gather the information in order to create the background information to set strategy and priorities.
Yeah, they have staff that will help through the whole process. They will help the board and the county executive walk through that priority making process, which is very much sausage making. They will the other organization will help you through the vision, mission, values part of it. And then once you've got all of that done, the ResourceX group will also walk staff through the technical implementation of everything Aaron was walking you through, because it's intense. If you were going to implement anytime soon, my suggestion would be adopt your budget in November and start working on priority-based budgeting in December for next year. And you might have your first drafts by May or June. Right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions for you, John?
No, I appreciate both of you coming on. I know both have been a resource for me in my year and a half of being a county executive, so I thank you for that. I thank you for coming on here and giving this presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, and I would welcome you as you go through this journey to contact us anytime. We'd be happy to, share lessons learned. We were the first adopter in Wisconsin and one of the first in the country. So been there, done that, and we'd be happy to help you not go through some of the learning curve that we had to go through. But at any point in time, feel free to reach out. I mentioned Marathon County, Jefferson County, now Vernon County. I think there's even more than that too. So, I know Ben in Jefferson would be happy to talk to you. He's their county administrator, and Lance up in Marathon as well. So, certainly there's plenty of resources that you can touch base with to see how effective it's been for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good day. One thing I must go back to here on public comment, Mike, did we have anybody on Zoom that had any comments? I didn't ask for Zoom comments.
No one submitted anything to the chat.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Item 4, discussion and possible action regarding resolution transferring $175,000 from an undesignated general fund balance to the county executive's office for use in contracted services to provide strategic planning and develop of a priority based budget system proposed from 9/27/22. That was brought up, and then it was said that we wanted more information on it, so that was held over. Something we've really kind of overlooked, the fact that we have a P&F committee that is currently handling all the budget transfers from projects or from grants into projects. The plan that I envision is that P&F committee would handle anything the ARPA funds was okay to, as far as individual projects or individual buys, so that money should be tracked throughout the budget and throughout the ARPA funds. So I have to get that in there. We have not discussed that, and I think it's a good time, an appropriate time to discuss it and vote on it. So this is open for discussion by anybody. It says possible action, so we don't need a motion first, so.
I did just want to say that before we started having commission meetings, I did confer with Corporation Counsel, and I asked her whether budget transfers related to the use of ARPA funds should go through Personnel and Finance Committee. And she said that in her opinion, because of the resolution establishing this commission, authorized this commission to make recommendations directly to the county board. It was her opinion that resolutions applying ARPA funds would not need to go through P&F. Doesn't mean that they couldn't, but they confer with Corp Counsel about that, and that's her opinion.
It's another check and balance, and it's something that the board likes to see before they have to put a stamp of approval on it. It's on every resolution that we put through the board. Anything coming through the board, you give it the okay of the ARPA committee and have no view from finance and from personnel. That I really fear that the board may want to reject more than vote for. We've looked at that a couple of different ways, but everybody that I've talked to wants at least being able to say something with regard to those funds, where they're directed.
I think that's the point that the board was very specific that the chairman of P&F was on this commission. And I would trust all the other board members here to be, I guess, competent enough to make these recommendations without having to go through another committee. Again, that is not to discount the value of personnel finance. I just feel if we're going to do that anyway, then why should this commission exist? And I think as it's set up, we have 3 members of the public, that it's very well split up between our rural areas, Nina Fox Crossing and the Oshkosh area, that this is not only just a recommendation for the board, a recommendation of community as a whole. And I feel with you, as being the chairman of personnel and finance being here, I think that gives it enough merit that the board would agree to that.
Well, thank you for putting that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's try this a little farther. Let's say we make a recommendation as this commission to the full county board. And the county board either rejects that proposal in part or in full. Where would it be referred back to? I mean, we can introduce a motion to refer it back to committee or commission. Where would it be referred back to? Probably P and F, right?
My feelings, the way it stands right now, this is my feelings. If they were to refer it back, it'd have to go back to this commission. The way it stands, but everything goes through the board.
Okay.
If the board don't go along with it, then they'd have to refer it back. To the
And that's
commission.
based on Mike's interpretation.
Well, right, and the way the motions were stated and the board meetings and how they were set up.
Okay,
So it's not saying what he's saying is wrong, it's just my interpretation right now, that's the way it goes. If it's to be referred back, it come back to this commission. Yes,
Thank you. And I sat through a number for the last year and a half through the Personnel and Finance Committee, waiting to hear what was happening with the ARPA Commission and the ARPA funding. And it felt like every single meeting when it was brought up was, that's outside of, we have these initiatives that we have to take care of. That's a separate initiative. So it felt like it was a strong agreement of the Personnel and Finance Committee that there should be a separate committee, and they approved this committee to make the determination of those funds. And I agree with what Josh was saying. If there's no strategic plan, and that's what it felt like a lot of times in those Personnel and Finance Committees is there was a lot of wait, let's bring that back. That's not part of, so that's where the strategic plan would really help with. Here's what our focus is, and it's easy to say that's not our focus right now. Here's our priority. This is what we're working on. So it feels like this committee was set up to take it off the responsibility of Personnel and Finance, and Personnel and Finance made the determination that this committee would suffice.
Sure, yes, sir. Beth, let me just to your point. The reason finance, P&F, wouldn't get involved is because the direction to where the projects were going to be taken from or put in was never there. However, there is an accounting for projects to be started and what account numbers and where the money is actually coming from. There is an account at Associated Bank with that ARPA fund, all that ARPA money. We would like to make sure that that money is used exactly as it's asked for, and nothing more. And it's not anybody's slush fund. We want to be sure that all of the monies that are coming out of there are designated for a specific project. We don't want, a project lingering or falling apart. I can tell you from an example that I have, okay? We in March passed the 303 resolution. The 303 resolution involved itself with a neighborhood grant program that was written from the state. Okay, then those projects that are out there right now are waiting to be paid. They do not have the money to continue forward. The grant was approved by the board. The money or the accounts were approved but set aside. My feeling is they have a direct result on how much the ARPA funds have to share with the rest of the community, because about $10 million of those ARPA funds are being directed towards the neighborhood grant program. So it can pay for the labor that is going into that. We don't have any control over it because nothing was set up for the neighborhood grant program. And we have no control over $10 million of the ARPA funds. If that goes through on your list, sir.
For two, Chairman O'Brien,
Yes,
that's two different funds. And the money that we're waiting for them is for the state grant agreement, which has been more than complicated. I believe we've tried 6 times to get that addressed with the state, and I think we're going for a 7th right now. So when that money comes in, that money will be passed through directly to those organizations. That is, to be clear, not part of the 33 million. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is the strategic plan money, the action item that's actually up. I don't really disagree with the fact that if this is approved as it is, then it goes through personnel and finance, because we don't have a spirit fund set up yet. And that we would be asking for this to be funded through the general fund currently, to be reimbursed by that money when it's set up. So I wouldn't personally have anything against this motion going through personnel and finance if everybody was okay with that. And that being said, as much as I've been pushing for this, and as hard as I've been pushing for a strategic plan and a priority-based budgeting tool to help us along, I would not be heartbroken if we wanted to again table this until the funds are set up through Mike. And I would ask Director Collar his opinion on that. If you think this is even ready to move forward, or you think if it's smarter for us to wait.
Well, in my opinion, it's simpler in a way if we wait until next year when that spirit fund is set up. I would anticipate, setting that fund up early in the year. But it has to wait till, the fund balances are calculated for the end of the current year, at least provisionally. And then we'd have to, transfer that money back out into a separate fund that we're actually going to allocate for the ARPA spending. This was brought forward, I think, originally earlier, and the way it is because, is it something we need to get started on? I mean, that's the only reason, and that's for the board to decide, or this commission to decide if they want to pursue that. There's no real reason it can't be pursued now. I know Supervisor Reisen mentioned even the possibility of a budget amendment. This was written to take it out of the 2022 funding before 2023 budget, so that would be the fastest way to get it started. That's the only real consideration. In some ways, it would be simpler, but that would delay the project or delay the implementation of any form of strategic planning effort by several months.
2 or 3 comments. What is spirit? I'm not up on the lingo.
It's, if I may, Mr. Chairman, it's a little bit complicated, the financial maneuvering, but the way the ARPA funding is set up, there are all hundreds of pages of regulations from the Treasury Department about how it can be spent. On the other hand, one category of things that can be spent on is replacement of lost revenue.
I remember that from last meeting,
Okay.
but the nickname or the
So-
acronym is spirit.
Well, it's not an acronym, it's a nickname, if you will.
Okay.
Our advice from accountants, from our auditors is that if we want to control the eventual reallocation of this money,
Yeah.
Which the commission expressed they wanted to do in the spirit of ARPA. Our advice from the auditors was that we have a separate fund set up, that it not be called the ARPA fund, because then it would look like it should have been subject to reporting requirements, which would complicate things, provide a lot more administrative effort, if you will. So my thought was to call it the spirit fund, meaning the spirit of ARPA, but without putting the ARPA label on it. And then that will be the direct source of funds that are allocated according to the commission's recommendations.
So the follow-up is, I am absolutely in favor of strategic planning. I think that if this county doesn't have it, we're making a huge mistake. I've heard 175,000 as to get the ball rolling. I've heard these two gentlemen speak very, very highly of one firm that they used and say they're experts in the industry. I don't know if the 175 comes directly from that firm, if that's a quote that they've made, if we've done an RFP. I'm wondering, as they said, they actually used the county extension agent to do a refresh. There is a pretty big university with an MBA program up the road here. And I know that other organizations have used them for strategic planning. I think the Community Foundation in Oshkosh, they just worked with Bill to update their strategic plan. I'm just wondering how far, if we're premature on this, or if we've explored all of our options to get the best result. I'd like to think that if you engage the university on some level in this project, you will find young students, not young, they're probably MBA students, but you'll find folks who may get more engaged in their community and want to stay here than if they're not invited into the process. So I think there are tangential benefits that we could realize, at least make the call. Find out the resources that are out there. I'm not saying that simply from cost effectiveness, although that may be there. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, this resource X or whatever has got the skills. There's just no question about it. I don't know if the skills are available here in the community. But unless we ask the question, we won't know. That's.
And if I could just partial answer, your point is that the answer is no, there hasn't been a specific bid given us. It's basically based on experience of Washington County and others, and then, add a little bit on because costs are increasing. So there's not a real, at this point, there's not a real specific hard firm basis for that 175, just kind of based on what people's experience have been and what the trend has been. But if it's approved, then of course we would go out and seek proposals from entities that would obviously include the ones they mentioned, and certainly the university makes a lot of sense to see what they have.
You said what Washington County had plus a little bit added on. What's the little bit added on? What was theirs?
I'm kind of going third hand on what Ethan told me. I think he had something like 140, 150 that he could add up back to the envelope type of numbers to get to, and then add it down to 25,000.
Well, 125. What he added up.
Oh, no, 100, close to 150, I think he said.
150.
Yeah.
That would have been how long ago did he add up on the envelope?
Oh, that was just when we presented this at the last meeting.
Well, I agree with you. We've got UWO down here. Then again, if we do this, is 175 enough? That's the next question. If we're gonna do it, we might as well do however it's gonna cost us. I'm not saying, I'm still up in the air over it. Last time I made the motion that we should oil it off. I'm still not exactly sure. I think we definitely need it, yes. Strategic planning, I think something that we're gonna have to have. But then on the other hand, I think this commission has got to get doing something, no matter whatever it is. We've been sitting here for however long that first money come in, and we still haven't done it. We've had people come every month that we've been holding these meetings, and we don't even have them saying how they can propose something if they want to give it to us yet. And we're still debating on first base here. So I really don't know what to say, but I agree with you. I still think other things should be looked into here rather than just saying the 175,000. We're hoping we could get it done for that or whatever. So I'd like to hear from some of the other ones that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Yep, expressing the same sentiment as Mr. Galloway over there that to create, more buy-in, right, from folks and it would be, disservice that we didn't look at the university here and ask them for their expertise and wholeheartedly in favor of this strategic plan. Like I said, creating more buy-in. It's definitely needed, but if we just approve this today, I mean, that decision off the table to go down to UWO and talk to some of those folks, and maybe Mike, you can answer that.
No, not at all. I think the first step is approval of a budget, something to work with, at least tentatively, and then that's when we investigate specific proposals from various entities who might be able to do it.
Okay.
And then if you do that, say, have to back this committee then too? Say, okay, we got one for 180,000 it's gonna cost us. Does that have to back this committee or 150,000?
It would have to come back if we're over the 175. Normally, it's administrative if it's under the amount that's been approved.
Go ahead, we give you or Silver John, go ahead, no matter what.
Mhm.
Who else? I mean, you must have something.
Well, it's more of a county board issue than an ARPA committee issue right now, so I don't know if we should even vote on.
Isn't it? It's
vote on this.
part of the commission right now.
I'm happy to do a strategic planning funding. We all end up doing that some point or another in our company, so that's fine, but it's kind of a board issue. If the board wants to do this or not, and it's fine to take ARPA money out and spend it on this. Although if we spend this much time on every ARPA requested 175,000 times 30 million, we'll be here a long time.
John?
Yeah, I just want to point out the fact that last October, I went to personnel and finance for ARPA specialist and strategic planning. And the reason that it's on here is because I do think that we're behind. I don't think it's anybody's fault necessarily. The way that Winnebago County has run has worked for Winnebago County for a long time. I think that we're up against some tough choices here in the years to come, and the sooner that we get moving on a strategic plan and priority-based budgeting, even if we just had the strategic plan in place already, it would have made the commission of the job of this commission much easier. If we had a strategic plan in place already, we may not have even needed an ARPA commission because we would have already known what our priorities are. And the reason I had it on here is because I feel that I wish it had been approved last October. I wish we had a strategic plan already in place. It would have been done by now. This does not disqualify us from going to UWO to see if they're willing to bid. And I think if we approve $175,000, which would cover both the priority-based budgeting tool and strategic planning, that we're going to get some healthy bids because the money is already approved. So there's going to be a lot of people jumping at that bait, if you would. Tom, I don't know how much consulting you would want to do for a project that may or may not happen.
I mean, once you know the number, you can fill in the hours to get to that number. So
Right.
I prefer to not have
It works
the
both
number be a
ways.
public number, but I prefer public commission, so.
Right, but it's not specific, being very specific on how much of this goes to resource X or how much of this goes to the priority-based or the strategic planning, or how much it's going to cost us to implement it. And I hope that this number would do all three of those things.
Or who is going to implement it? Are you going to have a specific man in place? Or do you have somebody named in place that you want them to be the strategic implementer?
So
No, and I would say a person in place because there are plenty of people in our county that are more than capable of doing such.
That brings me to your suggestion. We have a university with many people there that can figure out just how strategic we need to be and from where we should be pointing to get the strategic planning software from and who we might have to implement. And I think it would be a very good idea to go to the university first and tweak the idea of strategic planning software and see what they come up with.
Those are two separate things. Friday-based budgeting is a software, strategic planning is. I just want to be clear, they're two separate things.
Tom, you haven't said anything?
I work in a very small world. I believe that we already have a strategic plan, but it's not working like it should be. But part of that is just the people being let do what they need to do, given the direction. So one question comes to my mind is that you gotta pretty much chart where what are you doing now and what's going to change. And it's above my pay grade. I'm sure I'm gonna get better at it and have a better opinion, but right now, we've got a plan. We've got a 5-year construction plan, I believe. Right? They're like roads in that. So, yeah, I mean, we have plans already. It's a matter of what you want to throw at it and what you want to call it, how you want to paint it. But, you're the boss. If you say you need help, you don't have the capabilities of doing it, well, then I guess sometimes you get some help. Then the question is how to do that, to what end? How much it's gonna cost. I was once told by a consultant, being a consultant, walk in their room, you find out what they're doing, and tell them, and then I'll walk back 4 months, 10, and say, whatever you're doing it wrong, do it the opposite. You can be very successful, because evidently that's the reason they got you there the first time. So you gotta have some, you gotta know what's going on, and that's what I have to assume you do. But I'm not that good with numbers. I haven't made it through the budget book yet, but I'll follow.
I guess I think I've demonstrated to the body here that I'm very sensitive about messing with the structure of the county board, its size or its committees. It works well. The residents of this county are very well represented. If the focus of this is to just address budgeting issues and another area of how you establish those budget criteria and priority, I'm very reluctant, but I think I would go along with it. I was very sensitive to what they were saying. And I'm very sensitive about another initiative by a county supervisor with a county board structure, but as long as this don't mess with that part of it, and that is my understanding, then I think it's probably something we should maybe get into.
County executive.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'm gonna say about it is it, could I drive this culture as the CEO of this organization? Absolutely. 100% has nothing to do with the fact that, I'm not sure if I can do the job. I can do the job. That's why I'm proposing this. I want to make sure that it doesn't seem like it's one man's opinion on where Winnebago County is going and I drag us there. I want to make sure that we form this together as the board and the executive, and we listen to our stakeholders and what our priorities should be. And I think that's good leadership of understanding the powers that I have as the county executive, and they're very broad. 5917 is a very broad statute. It gives the executive plenty of power, of which I have no will to flex, if you would. And this is again me trying to say I want to work together with everybody to figure out where we're heading. Because there's going to be a time with levy limits and everything else that's coming, we're going to have to make some hard choices. I want to make sure those are wise decisions, that we know what we're talking about, that we know what we're based on, and that the priorities are not mine alone or yours alone, that it's ours together. So I guess that would be I am in full support of the $175,000. I'm in full support if we want this to go through PNF as well. Because this is technically going to have to be fronted clearly from a general fund until we understand where it's gonna come from. I understand it would be easier to wait for staff and Director Collard. But I believe we've been waiting since last October. And then we need to get moving on this.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm glad you brought it up about P and F, because based on where we are, if we're gonna take it from our current fund balances, I don't have a problem at all with P and F. But I do not want to delay the process of this commission. To me, it's important we move forward and we do it rapidly and consistently. So I don't have a problem. Yeah.
So I think she got it up.
And just to follow with that, and I'm sorry if I miscommunicated what I was trying to originally say. I was talking maybe about two different things. I think a strategic plan is essential for this to determine where this 33 million is gonna go, because without those high level priorities, once we open up the gates to apply for money, everybody's gonna come through. So I think it's really important even to have a mini strategy for this group. Here's what we're gonna focus on, if it's homelessness and infrastructure and roads and whatever, to be able to say, sorry, that doesn't fit within our priorities. So I think maybe I was talking to, I would strongly suggest a strategic plan, but I also understand the timing, as you say, we're coming down to the wire and having that determined. So I think it would be good to at least determine the priorities for this group.
And to come off what she's saying, what I'm very interested in is where the money goes. The last 10 million we gave out was predominantly in the Oshkosh area. It went for all good things in the Oshkosh area, but there is Fox Crossing, there is Amarillo, there are these other places that should see some benefit to money. So I'll be looking at where the organizations are, what they're doing, what areas they provide needs for, to make sure it kind of gets spread out. I really like when we decided, and I think we decided 25% was back to the county and 75% was in the general fund. I think that's great. That's a good step. But I'm also looking at spreading out to other areas that don't have.
Would you be more general county funds or general projects in the county for various towns when you said that statement?
I think there's things that should be budgeted for through the county anyhow. So that shouldn't.
But that should be the greater amount.
Yeah, but I'm saying is if you're gonna do it, let's say for some reason there's ice skating rink up in Fox Crossing that needs to be paid. Yeah, maybe something like that would be a good idea. And I should almost go to Amarillo. I haven't been there in a long time. But that's the kind of thing I'm looking at, is saying, let's try to spread it out and be cognizant of it. I heard something else. I think Chuck was saying, yeah, if for some reason some fire trucks come up, don't give them 100%, but matching funds or something. That's another interesting idea, I think. So there's so many things out there, but we're not getting there yet. We're still trying to get done with the basics of how we're gonna manage the money. We gotta jump over that and start doing it.
There's a lot of new fire trucks in the area.
Yeah.
Let me add. We don't have the neighborhood investment grant taken care of in time, in a time of need for that. Their accounting system is broken because they don't have the accounting. You could have the accounting system set up if you've got a problem with the state not having enough money or the state not moving fast enough. That's a whole new question that you can answer. Wait a minute, no, you can answer with state questions out to the state, and we're not at a loss over here for it. But if you don't have the accounting in there for ARPA, and we've got 33 million sitting out there waiting to be spent, it seems awfully unusual that it wouldn't come through P&F and have those account numbers. right there and ready for it to be focused on and moved. Mike, I'm pointing that at you.
I see you are, but I'm not sure I understand your point, Frank.
Well, he's put some paperwork, she being Carol Blackmore, has put some paperwork, I'm sorry.
Now let's stay on this number 4 right now. Let's not
Well,
talk hard.
okay. But we're trying to get account numbers settled for ARPA. We're trying to get, projects going for ARPA. We need to have the bookkeeping ready to go. And I would suggest that we bring it back through P&F to verify everything on the up and up. So when we do get an audit, or when we do get questions, we've got something to answer them with. Period. End of story.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You know, agree, but having that strategic plan, whatever that may be, whatever things that this commission decides on, whether that be, does the money help retain folks in Winnebago County, whatever that is decided on, but I couldn't agree more that that has to be done first before, that's going to be our guiding light. And I agree with Mr. Cox on this about going to P&F, but I think that that's why this commission was assembled with folks from all over the county that were capable of individuals to make those decisions. And then the check and balance is going to be going back to the county board. So, what I fear is that, as always happens, or happens too often, is that we drag our feet on these projects, and then guess what happens in construction? Those project costs just went up because we drug our feet on that. So I am not in favor of having a third, check and balance in there. I think the check and balance is the county board, that we have committee chairs and folks on here that are trusted individuals to make those decisions. So. Just my opinion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, I was. Go ahead.
The motion is that the commission recommends that the county executive engage in a RFP for a strategic plan. And as soon as possible, and come back with some recommendations. I don't know when we're supposed to meet next, but that is probably too quick. But within the next 2 months, because I've heard general consensus, strategic plan would be a good idea. I don't want to so commentary after the resolution. To throw out a number is bait in the water. I can make it fit. And that's not how my company does it. We say we want to do something, we get an RFP, and if we don't like the number, we'll say, okay, it'll be black instead of white, or it'll be, we'll start shading. But you don't give them the number to hit up front. So that's the commentary to go along with the motion.
Would we need a resolution for the RFP?
Comment on the report.
Pardon?
In my opinion, if we do an RFP, public contracting is much different, frankly, than private sector.
I would bet.
People who present bids to public entities want to know that money has been approved by the governing body, otherwise they will not submit a proposal. They will not. So what we rely on is producing some competitive bids, and we don't have to accept any bid. We can still negotiate with the bidder, but they won't even talk to us if we don't say we have this through the governing body, because then it's just me. Then it's just Mike Collard saying, hey, will you give us a bid? And they're thinking I'm going to do a lot of work, and the board hasn't even approved it. They won't bid.
I agree. That's one of the frustrations I've had from the private. Is that if you don't have the approved amount, you'll get one bid. And we get bit by them over and over and over again.
Then I withdraw my motion. Thank you for the education.
Not exactly.
Yes.
So, thank you. To move things along, I'll move to approve, the resolution transferring $175,000 from the undesignated fund balance to the county executive in general for to provide for strategic planning and development on a priority-based budget at this time.
Second,
Point of clarification, is this an up to $175,000?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's always up to, you know, if we don't spend it.
Motion has been made and seconded. Discussion.
Would we have, do you think it's prudent for us to do, to be reimbursed at a later date for this commission or?
Well, see, we drafted the resolution already, and I didn't re-put it in the packet because it was in the previous meeting, so,
Okay.
but the resolution has a whereas clause. Whereas funds allocated for these purposes from the undesignated general fund may later be replaced by resources made available through designated uses of the ARPA funds. So I'm trying to, in a very general sense, at least look to that likelihood in the future.
And could you strike may
But shall.
and shall? Yes.
I can't really say shall without designating where those funds would come from, and we haven't established that fund yet. So that would be an accounting problem.
Let's then establish quickly the accounting for the ARPA funds as a spirit fund and those accounting numbers that are sitting out there. Make an account set up for ARPA funds. Put the accounting numbers in there that we can draw from and allow us to P&L to take the budget transfers directly from the ARPA account and send it to where it has to go. That's all.
That would be inconsistent with the resolution passed by the board last week.
There's a motion on the floor and seconded to go ahead and transfer $175,000 from undesignated general fund balance to the county executive's office for the use of contract services. Provide strategic planning and develop a priority-based budget system. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, a caveat, I assume that if this is approved, that the focus of the administration will be to seek RFPs and then bring them back to this commission. You have the funding. I don't believe this approves the hiring. Right. Okay, good. That's my understanding.
Any other discussion?
Is it the wish of the commission that we send this through PNF or directly to county board?
Wasn't said to festival
Well,
unless these guys want to add it.
I just want to make it clear because as I understood the
Well, I
motion,
don't-
it was just to approve that resolution.
Two things. I agree
Yeah.
partially with Mr. Cox. I agree partially with your point. So this, I would think, will go directly to the county board. I think, Mr. Cox is dealing with, once we've appropriated funds, that it needs to come from a segregated account. And I would support going to PNL because he's tracking the account numbers. But we're a long ways down the road before we get to that point. We need to approve funding. And then I think we should go.
So right now, just go to the board.
Right now, just to the board.
Any other discussion?
How can we make that, how can we solidify that small caveat? And keep that rolling? Can we take something like that and put it in the form of a resolution or motion?
At some point, I think when we get to the bottom line, I mean, our next step, I hope, is to determine what percentages we're gonna do here. But when we start deciding who's gonna get what money, and that decision is made and approved, then I think it needs to go to the county board. If they approve it, the expenditures of those funds need to go through your committee.
We're gonna,
Quote, expenditures.
if it's not done as or with this resolution, you're gonna have people screaming from the walls in the county boardroom when it's coming up, because there's an awful lot of favors come through the county board with the funds, so there can be adequately check and balance.
I would hope my explanation satisfies that, and obviously what I'm saying needs to be in the minutes. So it can be referenced by a member of the county board if they so choose. But unless there's some disagreement, and we can vote on that separately as a separate agenda item, if you wish. On the road, that would be my focus.
Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Carried unanimously. Item 5, discussion and possible action regarding a potential county interlease of ARPA funds and potential division of funds between county, internal use, and community projects.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Perry.
I think this is the appropriate time to address, I believe we have 3 proposals that were on the floor. One was 75%, 25%. Your focus was 25%, 75%. The first item I'm referring to the county money and how much they were receiving. And now we have a third from the county exec, which is basically 25-50-20. I think the first thing the body needs to do is decide which one of those we want to go through.
If I may, there's little, after the last meeting, me and Mike we were unsure what the direction was, if it was 75 county, 75 community. So we had discussed of bringing multiple proposals forward. But the thing that didn't sit right with me, is that if we were gonna do 25% county, there were things that I were gonna say are county driven, but definitely community, community takes advantage of it.
Which you demonstrated has done.
Right, yep. And what I didn't want to do is have things move back and forth between lines. I wanted consistency. So what we kind of tried to do here, we worked on this quite extensively, is figure out a way to meet both proposals in one. So 25% is county internal asset. It has nothing to do with the outside communities whatsoever. You can see a building study or the fiber loop or some things that are strictly for the county and county alone. And then I wanted to look at 50%, which was in question, whether to go community or to go county, of the county things that actually benefit the community. So I wanted to break that down to that 50% that we weren't sure which way to go with it, instead of having 2 different proposals. Thing like the land conservation efforts. I mean, this is something that the county, our land and water division will run, but it's programs for farmers over 10-15 years that will benefit them. So it's still a county aspect, but not necessarily money that we're giving to a nonprofit. That we're partnering through land and water. And some of the other things that I have in here, the walk-on dam renovation, I think that will benefit the community as a whole, because we're fixing a park. The upgrade to the expo center, I figured, because as a community, if something happens, that we need that to be a reunification center, that that'll be a benefit for the community as a whole. And then the 25% at the end for just what we send out to the community, the I guess grantees or grantors.
Based on that explanation, Mr. Chairman, I will introduce a motion to approve the percentage of funding, not necessarily the project.
Right.
The percentage of funding as proposed by the county exec.
25, 50, 25 is what you're saying?
Correct.
Under those headings. Under the
Headings alone.
Yeah, I guess the headings would be okay, but we should discuss projects. I mean, that'd be a different.
The projects were simply put in to give you an idea
Yeah.
of what we were looking at.
So the headings and the percentages.
So of the 3, that's the one I'm picking. I do appreciate that.
Point of clarification, the acronym NIGF.
That is the Neighborhood Improvement Fund. And the only reason I put that on there is to let people know and let the community know that Winnebago got more than 33 point whatever million dollars for ARPA. That we also had this big piece that went out to a bunch of nonprofits. And for clarification, Unroll got some of that as well through Habitat Humanity, and Nina through Covey will be getting some of that as well. But I wanted the community to know that even though we're saying 25% is for community, that we've actually delivered more than. So that's what the NGI is.
So, based on what you just said, all of these are covered in the network
Neighborhood improvement.
our neighborhood improvement fund and will disappear, and that 10 million or whatever now gets replaced with new projects.
Oh, that's completely separate. I just wanted to put it on there so the community would see that we're not just talking about, you know, 8,347,000 for external acts. That we delivered more. I apologize if that created any confusion.
I am getting confused because
Has nothing to do with
the add ups for the 33.
I think that's separate.
Okay.
Chairman, go ahead.
Chairman?
I'm waiting for a second.
Yes, I may, I just want to clarify, just to be clear, this, for instance, the community, in terms of the 25-50-25 split we're talking about, 25% of the 10.4 million is 8,347,000. So the 8 million here for the 25% for solely community funds, the 50%, 60,695,000 for community projects through county functions, and the 8.3 million for the internal projects. Those add up to the 33.4 million roughly of ARPA funds. So that 10 million down here is in addition to the 34 million. They are not part of the 33, million. But they are relevant in terms of if the commission and the board decide that, you know, homelessness is an important thing, we want to attribute or allocate a third of our funding to address the issue of homelessness, that would be part of that discussion. We've already spent that 10 million, or at least allocated it, not spent. So that's the only reason it's there because I think it's relevant for those discussions of how much money we allocate to the community. We're already allocating 10 million to the community, roughly, or most of that 10 million. Some of it is through a county
We are not
department.
double dipping to
Right,
back this at another 10 million.
No.
correct.
So that 10 million is still out there in that grant waiting to be spent somewhere along the lines.
We're waiting for the state to deliver the funds. Correct.
To facilitate discussion, do I have a second for my
Second.
motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
My question though is, and I looked at this 100 times already, where is like the fire department? They're one of the first ones sent in there. Where will they fit in here?
I would consider them.
Well, Mr. Chairman, isn't that a separate thing? First, let's
No, this
establish
has to come in here.
the percentage. Well, we're not approving the document. In
No,
fact,
but
I don't
I'm
think.
asking where
Yeah.
they would fit in.
Where it would fit.
Where will it fit?
I would see it fitting
Is it
under.
county? Is it be county? Is it going to come out of your township?
Well, that ain't.
Okay.
Mr.
yeah.
Chair.
course not.
I think I'm simply trying to clarify the process before we get involved in discussion
And I want to
outside.
know where things like that.
First, you
fit.
establish the percentage you're going to set.
Yeah, and we had
Then
the-
you do the budget.
You said we had that established once before and we established where things were gonna go and all of a sudden it's changed. Not all of a sudden he had called me before, but so I'm just asking a question on where something like that would come out.
It will, if we approve the percentage, that's the next thing. I totally agree with that. I have the same.
Okay, so we approve it, but then it's not in there and then what do you say?
We're not approving the
Percentage you are.
percentages, but not the columns within the percentage.
No.
We're not approving that,
No.
just the percentage.
Just the titles and.
Yeah, that's all this
percent.
motion is.
Motion has been made and seconded to go 25, 50, 25, along with county internal community project through county functions. Community Journal S-25, and allocations from NIGF. So, any other discussions?
Wait. Allocation, GF doesn't even count.
Well,
That's not a time. Take that out of it, take that out of it. That doesn't count. What's?
Just a quick question on maybe general guidelines. Is there any guidance on projects versus fixed overhead versus expenses? Typically, you would put in at least 75% of these money should be one-time use, capital projects, non-budgetary expenditures. If there's any, maybe that's part of the other discussion, but that's the general guidelines we should work with.
I agree, and that should not include
But that's not,
capital project. Capital projects have already been put into there.
they're in the budget
They're
there.
in the budget down the road.
So that's
We got
just
a
one.
5-year plan.
But that's the detailed discussion.
What's
So
your opinion?
Anyways,
Yeah.
all those in favor of what was said signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Carried.
done.
How do you want to proceed, Mr. Chairman? Now we get into the nitty gritty.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, I went through this, so I'll just go through it.
Sure.
My observations. First of all, on the first page, county asked 25%, we go down to clerk and the board. That's asking for 800,000. I don't oppose that, but I think it's way too broad. I don't know where you want to put it. I don't know what you want to renovate or nothing.
Correct. And I just wanted to put these as ideas that are out there. And what I would like to see is that if we get this building study done, it's gonna let us know if we need a county boardroom, not necessarily sharing with the corporate.
I agree with that.
Right, but where to put that room, right? Do we put it on the 5th floor of the courthouse? Do we put it in this building somewhere? Do we figure out how to cram it into the Coglin Center? I don't know. You know, that's what.
So what you're saying, you're proposing it in this document, but it's pending upon a building study.
Absolutely.
Maybe
Yep,
we should put that in the document.
absolutely. No, I just wanted to give ideas.
I might will go to, these pages are not numbered, gentlemen, so you would go to community projects through community county functions. The second page of that, and the last two criteria prior to community ask. Everybody with me on those pages?
What was it,
What
Chuck?
about Dan? You want me to read it?
No, I think he's talking about housing initiatives.
Housing initiatives.
Yep.
And then partner projects with towns, and I'll emphasize that one in particular. Is everybody on the right page?
Yep.
Okay, housing initiative, once again, too broad. Does it and should it include the University of Wisconsin projects? Unless they're a capital issue. Let me get to the partner projects with towns, and this is gonna dovetail what Tom was saying also. You're looking at $33 million. Based on my counting, I have 22 municipalities in this county, and I included part of the town, our city of Appleton. Hopefully that's correct. If you divide that into the 3 million, you get $136,363.63 per community. If we were to look at it from that point of view. But then here's where I really get confused, and I need to let everybody know I have contacted the towns I represent. I have suggested if they have a project, they might want to start looking at it, putting it together. Based on legacy issues, submit it to the county or to myself, I'll bring it forward here. However, the question come up. Allow towns and municipalities to bring ARPA matching options. So are we saying the towns have to have ARPA funds available to match what we're giving them for a given project?
Not necessarily. I just wanted to put it in there as an idea. Again, I'm not asking for any of these things to be approved. I wanted dialogue in there to start the discussion and kind of funnel it
Okay,
in.
so would the criteria be then, we don't care what funds they've got. We would, in theory, appropriate $136,000 per community for a project that is ARPA. How can I word this, Mr. Collins? ARPA function.
Right.
It is part of something that ARPA required initially, that focus.
Right.
It can't be for something that doesn't have legacy issues and doesn't support the COVID issue. Somehow we'd have to figure that out, right?
If I may,
Yes.
yeah, to Chairman Egan's point is maybe this is where radios fit in. You know, if a town needed money for that, because that could be a big part, and maybe they want to designate a small portion of their ARPA funds to it, and we come in with a match here. And I think that would be the point of that. So not only,
What do you do with the town that don't have funds left to spend?
well, they can still ask.
Pardon me?
They can still ask. I mean, they
Yeah.
would still come ask here, and it's up to this commission to decide whether they agree or not.
Okay.
And it's not a requirement to match funds. But I do know, when I've been talking the whole time on collaboration, if there's out there, let's say Fox Crossing wants to put in $300,000 for the ice arena. And they want to ask us for another $300,000, to make that work. That would be it'd sweeten the deal, I guess. It was a way to both help out our municipalities and our townships and to help for them to get the best benefit, maximize their funds as they can. I mean, if we can combine and throw it on the same project, I think that's a win for everybody.
Is it, to your point, is it more fair to do per township or per capita? I know some townships are pretty small.
Well,
Just a
that's
question.
why I divided it equally,
Right.
because that came up in town of Nina when I brought it up
All right.
that time, and they said, we want nothing to do with it per capita stuff. Because we lose out. The city of Oshkosh gets all the money and we're getting the peanuts,
Right.
that kind of, so. I apologize, I don't mean to be offensive, but in reality, that's how that would work, so.
Fair point.
That's just my thought,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did all the towns, correct me if I'm wrong, get ARPA funds, or did some of them not?
They all did,
My recollection that maybe there was some that didn't get it.
They got it, but they didn't accept it.
Oh, they did accept it.
Oh.
Okay,
Who was that?
Fox Crossing,
I don't think Algoma was there either.
okay.
I wasn't
That's what I thought.
thinking maybe you-
So just want to clarify that. And then, it's my understanding that this is just a roadmap. This isn't anything in ink. It's just, like you said, this is, just a guideline right now. So to get into semantics about, this or that, I thanks for putting it together.
Yeah,
It's a
and-
good guideline.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
What I really want to focus on in this middle section, the middle 50 and the bottom 50, the discussion I want to have is the headlines. The projects themselves. Because, and we'll get into the next discussion item, but those are the decisions I want to know in this group. How do we want to break that down? Is there something that we may be missing here? Are these the things that are important? And I put in there some things that I thought was pretty crucial on the housing issues. Like the housing issues to me is how do we go and figure out how we get decent housing for people in our county? Not necessarily strictly affordable housing, but maybe workforce housing too. How do we make soft spots for people to land? Because if people can't land somewhere, all of our programming doesn't matter. We have to have a landing spot for people to land. But that veterans piece, that is something that Director Buchholz was talking to me about, that they've been eyeing up $1 million, not necessarily for us to purchase a building, but for us to partner up with the Fox Valley Veterans Council. They have the Veteran Village up in Allegheny, but what we don't have is a transitional piece for veterans to come in and maybe almost like the tiny village, live there for 6 months to 2 years. And maybe that could be part of the housing initiatives. Maybe those will have to be two separate things. But I want to figure out what are the things we want to focus on, because, and when we get to the next one, the next discussion item is I think that solves the issue of how people will be able to ask for projects here if we can agree to some of these things. Some of the projects.
I've got one right away. I got two because I was in a meeting, but anyway, one, human services, $1 million. That's on there. I see already, we're at a meeting
Twice.
this morning.
Yep.
And, they didn't think that that would need to come out of there.
Then it doesn't have to, it can move. Like again, none of this stuff is set in stone.
So this comes back to my question. Now, we approved this, that can move, that can come out of there. So who's gonna have the authority to put that $1 million in some other place? We, so we as a
Yes.
committee.
Correct.
Okay, it isn't like a budget then.
No.
Well, no.
Yeah,
that
no,
happens.
I agree. No, that's the direction I want to get from this committee. What are the things we want to break this down into?
Yes, Tom.
So now we're getting to the point, we're gonna say we're gonna make a list. Now, you have a list. But I'm sure there's a list out there and people have been talking that, you know, you're gonna submit to and you'll be considered. So that's a whole mess of people that are sitting out there are waiting to be told how to make their application. How would you?
We need a formal application process. We can certainly emulate cities, townships, counties that have done that and make it specific for Winnebago, but they need to be able to compare projects out of the same, with the same bullet points. So yeah, we need that like right away.
Because am I right? We're missing all that.
Oh.
For us to go through this,
Did you do that?
some of this stuff might get bumped because there's something else out there.
I could find 3 or 4 from other places and see, and then maybe we could consolidate them.
Are you talking like an ARPA application?
Yeah, like a 2-page, whatever,
Sure.
little narrative, little list, little benefit,
Yep.
community.
It's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
Municipalities,
Yeah,
yeah, 22 of them.
well, I guess I'm talking about, I wouldn't want the Blackwell Township to do the same application as the Wyowash Bike Trail. I mean, they're different user groups. So maybe the county should have a different
Yeah,
track for
I
that.
think, are you referring to the 3 million municipalities?
Well, it's all,
Outside of that, then you get into different criteria, like the community,
the township should have their own.
yeah,
Wait,
within a certain
municipalities.
criteria.
Yeah.
Like municipalities must submit something. if they
Right.
want.
Yes,
And I have one more here for you. The expo, we heard, county board chairman bring it up that if this group don't go ahead and decide if he's going to bring it into for a budget. Well, if he's gonna bring it in the budget, so is that gonna just be wiped off, or do we say, yes, we're gonna go ahead and do that? It goes underneath ARPA funds.
Talking about the backup generator.
Backup generator and all, they've got it upgraded. They got upgraded expo under here, so. I'm just asked that because I was asked earlier.
Well, that's a good question, because it kind of puts us in the squeeze, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, how much debt level we want to take out? I mean, that's legacy, isn't it? And isn't the capital project something we pay for over time? I don't think it should just be disqualified, especially if this is something that, when we're talking about that, we're talking about 800 and some $1,000 for a what if scenario. We might not ever use it. We might not ever have to use a reunification center. A disaster might not ever happen where we actually have to make sure that there's power. That we make sure that there's the infrastructure for us to have separate EOC or be able to continue county government. And honestly, I hope we don't. Well, hold on one second. Well, for me to tell our taxpayers that we need to bond for a project of what if, that's hard to swallow. And I believe it belongs here.
Same concerns.
Yeah. John, your influence and your desire to watch it and not get involved is balanced by how much of that what if will actually happen. And we don't know that either. We're, you know, the good side of it would be, what if it did happen and we didn't have it, correct? Yeah. So I'm saying, you know, balance everything, but I don't think you need to slip everything out and short cycle the CIP book. Really, go through that CIP book and find those things that are absolutely necessary and try to fit them in. But the CIP book was put together for a reason. Yeah, sure. And, you know, it's a 5-year plan. It's our priorities and our strategic planning. Sir? Is that right?
I would say that some of our capital improvement projects that we have a return on investment. Our hangars will pay for themselves over time.
Yeah.
Our fire truck will never pay for itself over time. Doesn't. The expo center itself, maybe some of those things, the projects of the parking lot and horse barns will pay itself over time. Having a reunification center that is, will have power if the power goes out. It'll have the data structure that we need to operate government. We'll never have a way to return its investment over time. And those are some of the things that, the reason I put those projects in here. Most of these things, I think only $7.3 million of what's in here is specific projects.
I think you took me the wrong way. I'm not saying that it shouldn't have been in there, but I'm saying, what if Supervisor Isaac goes in and says, I'm going to put in to have that generator put in the budget, and then he pulls it in the budget here, we've already been planning on it coming out of in here. Why, so are we going to say at that time then, ARPA is gonna go ahead and take care of that part? We don't need to put that in a budget?
I mean, that's a decision that we make as a board. If we put it back in there and we balance it, then we should probably have a decision on where that money goes back, correct, Mike?
Well, if say the board were to put a particular project in the budget, and then the commission decides to recommend, and the board approves that should be paid for using ARPA funds. Well, by that time, we'll have that separate spirit fund set up. We can allocate that money out of there if that's what the board chooses to do. The board could decide to say, well, we don't want to use ARPA money for that because, you know, we already included budget money for that. But on the other hand, you know, the budget takes a lot of money out of fund balances. You know, and we want to put some of that back in the fund balance through a project, through funding a project that is within the spirit of ARPA and does meet those criteria. I think that would be a legitimate thing to do, but it'll be up to the board. You could either leave in the budget or take it out of the ARPA funds.
Mike? Are you going to do that after you've already got a resolution to take it out of undesignated fund or something? And now you're gonna take it out of the spirit fund, so you're having the board vote on it twice?
Well, if the board chooses to do that by voting to put it in the budget and then voting to pay for it using ARPA funds, that would be 2 board actions required, but that would be up to the board.
Okay, now think about that when it comes to budget transfers. And think about where you've already taken out of the general fund one time. Now you gotta transfer it back in, but you're gonna take it now out of the spirit fund, and you don't have any allocation numbers in order to take it out of the spirit fund because that's working in the commission. I'm saying that you need the accounting numbers in the spirit fund, just as you have the accounting numbers in the, make them separate. Have, just as you have the accounting numbers in your for the undesignated and for the various departments. And have your spirit fund be able to pull the money out by either department or by project. You know what I'm saying?
Well, there will be accounting numbers for the spirit fund when it's set up. And when the commission and board decide how to allocate the funds in there, it will be transferred to wherever is necessary.
How soon can you do it? Because it's gonna happen pretty soon.
And we just can't do it this year because it's based on the fund balances at the end of the year. That's just the recommendation from the auditor as to how to accomplish that.
I hear you, then you should, you know, make that known to Carol and whatever's helping you put those together.
We were talking about that this morning
Yeah.
with the auditor.
Anything else, John?
No, I think it's I think I have a clear direction on this. The question would be is when we're setting up these application sheets, right, these forms. Do we want it specific? Do we want it to just be a general form, or do we want them to list the initiative that they're looking to apply under, whether it's our 50 or the 25 external completely?
That's the way I see it.
That's the way I see it too.
This is what you now have, that they're looking at to build a justification. When they sit down, they want to justify what they want, the wants and needs. That is what I gave to Parkview and what they came in with the justification, whatever. This, you can have.
Okay.
Oh, I might have an extra one of those. I passed that out to the commission.
It needs to have that, it needs to have your justification up.
Oh, I think I'll need a copy.
If I might, the Community Foundation Grant Commission, the Grant Committee, used to have a fairly rigorous and very laborious grant application. You have to submit your budget, you have to submit your balance sheet, you have to submit all sorts of things. When things went crazy during COVID and everyone needed money, we got it down to a 2-pager. Make it, what is the need? What are you gonna spend it for? Do you have any other funders? That kind of thing. And it made it so much simpler for everyone involved. I wouldn't make this too hard myself.
Right, and a separate concern I have is that they're gonna ask for money for operations. Are we then, by giving that money, setting that nonprofit up to fail in the future?
Right.
You know, we have to do our due diligence here.
We saw the most need in COVID actually came on the infrastructure side. Most of these people had no computer skills, no accounting, it just.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find the body to staff, so that's where a lot of it went.
Should we have a separate application form for municipalities compared to other public groups?
Oh, I
Yeah.
think that-
Different form,
Yeah.
really? So we're always been 2 different forms, or I don't know. If we want to do-
And then we have the point the forum will say on it, and the amount of money that the board is allocated is this much for this one, or don't we do that?
I think probably we just collect them and see how what we collect compares to our outline.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
I mentioned 136,000. If we were to accept that premise, then they might want, 250,000.
I'd rather keep that in our pockets until we see what the applications look like. That would be my suggestion.
By your buck.
Do we know, city of Neenah, city of Menasha, city of Oshkosh, if they've allocated any of their ARPA money and there's projects, for example, I don't see any water infrastructure just on our guideline sheet, whatnot, that might be, does anybody know? If any of these cities have, said we're gonna X amount for that, and that could be a project that we partner with them on. If anybody in this room would have-
Something to have that in the form that they fill out as to what ARPA funds have we spent, what ARPA funds and projects have we spent on. So if they list their projects, they may have something you can match them on.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just thinking of water infrastructure in particular, right? And something that's gonna benefit. The whole county.
Right, and to what it sounds like, to what Mike's talking about, we'll be prepared after January to start releasing these funds, right? Clear for the audit.
Yeah.
So we have, next meeting, maybe, you can have a couple forms and we can really debate that and we can start talking about the different segments, maybe in that 50, in that 25, so we can make that clear. We have 2 meetings to really hash this out. I'd like it to be ready so that January, when we're ready to go, we're ready to start doing some things.
Let's bring this up, but $33 million given out to hundreds of applicants.
Mhm.
The audit trail of use of funds and properly spent, we saw how much was spent out of DC that was misallocated and just went away. I'm not sure how we follow back on success of our investments.
Well,
Another reason why we need a second viewing group, DNF, looking over the shoulder of God.
Maybe that,
So you find, you find that the board approved it based on the 5 votes of DNF, because we all did diligence. You did diligence and we did diligence in DNF. Yeah,
no,
we're looking at me.
no,
Oh,
wait.
wait for me.
Yep.
Asking the chairman to speak.
I've got a question though, for the fire department gets this, I think every one of us got that, so, and it would do something for the whole county. It's not just one particular fire department, something for the whole county. So when they go ahead and ask, whenever it comes time for their grant or whatever, where would they put it underneath? Community external, 25%?
No, I don't see that as community external. I see that as the 50 in the middle. Because it's
Okay.
government helping
Yeah,
government.
that's where I was asking, where is something
Yeah.
like that would fit.
That's, I think that's partner projects with towns and municipalities, and maybe that number goes up. Maybe we have that discussion next. We figure out percentages within the spread on the things that, the initiatives that we want to focus on and how much in each one, I think is the next meeting that we have, and maybe that number goes up a little bit. And because 3 million will definitely be enough to, well, should be enough
No.
to cover everybody's radios. I don't know.
No,
It's
we're
not,
talking about 5 million just for fire department radio.
just, yeah, but not everybody,
This is not even talking about radios. This is not even talking about radios.
right, some of them are already paid.
Right, but we're not even talking about radios, but they said this out, this was something total for the whole county would help, it wasn't per se radios or anything like that. You know,
Yes, so we way over.
right, Archie.
Yeah, I attend a number of meetings for those that don't, I think you need to have examples. You're gonna have to help the townships figure out where they qualify on this. Gee, I agree with what you're talking about, but the gentleman said a simple form. They're explaining the dollar amount, the justification. They probably most likely already have their exact fee known what they need. So you have to worry less about Morris's concern of, well, is this really going, they'll know if they're asking for something specific, 10 to 1, they would have the exact cost already identified. But to John's point, of help, what bucket this goes in, you're gonna have to give examples so they know what they're applying for, because it's a fine line between radios is a great example. They're all for the community. Which one of these 3 community things is this going to? So you're gonna have to help them, whether it's a nonprofit or a municipality, just give them help to know which bucket they're applying for. I feel fairly confident whether or not it's Alma or Winnebago or whomever, they'll know the exact cost of what they're asking for. But you have to help them know which bucket.
These people here that I was talking to was a group of firemen all together representing all of them.
Different discussion, but that will come,
Right.
you know.
If you had matching fund or something, or you had an area that you could say, we're gonna do matching funds with this group. If you didn't make the entire amount, you could match it, or match it.
Can be put on the form. It will help John trying to figure out what people are asking for to know what they qualify.
Supervisor Buck.
The gentleman down there has pointed about, I don't think we want to have this be like the PPP, fraud where trillions of dollars are being stole from the American taxpayers, right? And so to Supervisor Cox's point, how do we figure this out? Well, if you're doing a brick and mortar or an infrastructure, something tangible that's going into that instead of administrative fees or CEO pay or whatever, or lost funds that, you can, there's a generator. That's what we paid for, right? And so I think that's important that we, are diligent with how the guidelines of this.
Well, yes, the said before. You have a second pair of committee eyes helping you due diligence. It also sells it to the board to have two sets of eyes and two sets of votes. Is that good? Is that bad? Do you want to vote yes? Do you want to vote no? And take a look at the votes at the bottom of the resolution to give yourself a chance of voting the proper way. That's how we do it.
Supervisor Farag, did you have something?
Yeah, I did, but I'm starting to lose my train of thought.
Yeah, you're in.
Now, when you're talking about fire department, and you mentioned a clarification, the radios in particular would be addressed through county, community projects and county function, correct? That was your position. It would not be part of the $3 million. That's, well, actually, it's on the same page here, but, so that would be a separate amount outside of the 3 million.
I think it could be part of that $3 million, and I think we can adjust with what that $3 million looks like. Maybe it's more. Maybe we specify that for government and government agencies.
Given that parameter, then it begs a question, and I'm aware of the fire department's request. An example in the town of Inland, I brought it up at a public hearing, and the fire chief commented, "We don't need radios." However, I have a document that indicates, yes, eventually they're going to need the radios. But if we were to appropriate funding per community, as I illustrated at 136,000, isn't that the community's responsibility to determine where they're going to spend it? Which could be the radios.
As the grantor, it's still our responsibility to make sure they're in compliance with everything that they spend it on. So that's the concern that I have.
So I'm thinking, the general funding, as the example, 136,000 per community would help them a lot if it's COVID related issues. Separate from that would be the radio issues. Do we have an idea of how many radios would be needed by, just take the towns alone? You got 15 towns.
I have the original sheriff's purchase, not with me today, sir. I have the original purchase that the county purchased, for all the fire departments.
Including the towns, yeah. That would be,
Including all the, every one of them.
so that would give us a number.
That would give us a number,
10 years ago.
from 10 years, just the quantities.
Yeah,
$5.5 million. 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was $5.5 million.
5.5 million. Okay.
That include the county radios?
Yes. But it's estimated to be today closer to like 7.5 or 8.
For
For all
everybody?
regions. Yep,
And then we're in the same boat again in 10 years.
right.
But that being said, it wouldn't be the 7,
Well-
and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong here. Because some communities have
Already bought theirs.
already bought theirs.
City of Oshkosh Fire, Police, Neenah and Ashland Fire, Neenah Police, Neenah Fire. So those are the biggest user groups. They've already purchased theirs.
Right.
So we have to reimburse them.
Some of them are-
Well, no, and that's the
Yeah,
point,
right.
right?
If you fix it up, then you can do that.
Oh, you can.
Right, and if we looked at this, then the communities that did save up and pay for their radios, they would be able to look at their monies for other aspects. But I think that the townships, the municipalities should make those decisions for themselves. And that's the way we're not punishing those that saved for 10 years.
Yeah, very valid point. Very good.
But I'm still off that radio kick. I'm talking about something. Just
Talking about fire trucks.
911 or something like that they talk about for the whole county that use that. You know, it's something that isn't just fire trucks or whatever, but for everybody in the county.
And that, I believe, is a conversation that has to be made with dispatch first.
I think they have.
Yep, and I don't understand the inner workings of the 911 fire thing. So I will defer it to you, but we need to make sure that our dispatch center can actually facilitate it.
I missed what you were talking about. Walter.
The primary dispatch.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
It's a software program. Software program with ongoing costs, so we have to look at that too.
By that tomorrow. if you wanna give me money, that's no problem.
I'm sure.
Anything else? So, motion made and seconded to go along with that 50-25-25, and I believe we voted on that already. So. See what else?
Six. And Mike, you have enough guidance on that, be able to come up with some kind of a form and an
Well,
idea?
we come up and start and maybe, we can give you a little bit of help if you have some examples. Yeah.
It is number 6, I lost your. Discussion and possible action regarding process to solicit and collect requests for community projects, which we kind of talked about and decided we're gonna do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, so we'll do forms, we'll come up with some forms, and then, next meeting, we can decide if we wanna have how we want that process to go, you know, how do we wanna sit through forms, then we will get down to some forms, and then maybe bring presentations here, or to the county board, how we wanna do that. I think we should discuss that at the next meeting.
We should come here.
That becomes
Yeah, me
important,
too.
because you don't want 50 million people here and then somebody not being able to speak. You're gonna have to come back, right?
Well, I think, we're gonna get a lot of submittals. We need to go through those and determine which ones we would accept. And then maybe go from there if we need to do a presentation.
And perhaps we could discuss next time too, if we're gonna have some sort of formal scoring system or just, you know, try to fit them into the categories or exactly how we'll evaluate. We're gonna have presentations from the,
Are we ready to start that now?
no,
Like we're skipping over things now.
yeah, we're not ready to start that, but do we want to anticipate that?
I'm asking the question. That's
Well,
Tom shaking his head over there. I don't.
So we want to discourage them. We don't, we know they're calm.
We want them to say what they have to say on the application form, not to.
I express my opinion, whoever applies, it needs to be related to the COVID criteria. It can't be for operational expenses, it has to have a legacy component for your, in my opinion, that's what I.
Your forum's gotta have a justification area, where they would justify.
Right. And we'll want them to refer to specific categories in ARPA, because the commission has already made clear we want to have these projects justified according to the categories originally set out in ARPA.
Okay, if there's nothing else, next meeting date and time.
Yeah.
Can we get by a meeting only once a month?
Are we gonna
I think
need
until
more?
January.
I'm sure we want you to get it
I'm
done.
good tomorrow.
January.
I'm not.
I'm not.
You need something before, so you can continue on into January real quick, so it's all ready to go the first part of January.
I think we want to bring back draft forms and things and have some discussion before January.
Okay.
We agree on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, would you mind working offline with Mike on that?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I'll collect some apps. from
So, but probably one more meeting at least before the end of the year, right? So it could be even early December.
Does 2 o'clock work for everyone? Seems like everyone is
Yeah,
here.
sure.
Do we have to vote on that?
Well, we will, just
We
make
will.
sure it's all
Okay.
2 o'clock, all right with everyone?
Yeah.
And what date would it be, Mike, if we follow the same?
We haven't been very consistent.
When would you be able to give us the information?
What about Thursday or Wednesday, the 30th of November?
That'd be
Or
fine.
the 23rd would be enough. Do we want to have 2 more meetings?
But 23rd's in the middle of your hunting, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the day
Right.
before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So the 30th would be about the earliest, or we could go into
Not in my
December
calendar.
7th if you want to wait a little while.
And then we could have one a couple weeks later, perhaps in December, if we need to.
Do we want to stay on Wednesdays or go back to Tuesday? Do the 29th, or is that,
What do you think of
does
the
that not work for
Thursday
you?
or Wednesday?
I like Wednesday better. to
Wednesday's
be honest.
fine for me.
Does that work for you?
Yep,
Fine,
What
I'll
do we
make it
have
work.
you can make it work.
Yeah,
Wednesday the 30th?
Wednesday the 30th?
Wednesday, the
It's
30th.
good.
Everybody, Wednesday.
Wednesday the 30th at 2 o'clock right here.
All right.
So I have a motion to do that, so it's all on record.
Don't move.
Second, motion made, seconded for November 30th at 2 o'clock, right here in this building, in this room.
I want to attempt not to get lost. coming in the
All
door.
those in favor,
So you don't
signify
have to
by
come
saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. I'm open for adjournment. Thank you.
I'll make a second.
Made second adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Who made the motion to approve the minutes? I didn't catch it.
I did.
Approve the minutes.
I did.
Approve the minutes.
You did.
Oh, he did.
And you all seconded it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do that.
That over by DNR.
Yep, that's the building, yep.
Cool.
I,
Reach out to you, yeah.
Yeah, think about it. One number is.
I want to make sure the municipality is good. I'm not sure.
Well, it is.
No, you're not. I kept on. Kept on digging in there, but.
Complexity of.
Well, I can contact you separately.
Oh, God.